as is always the case, whatever we experience, it can seem so individual to us, so unique to us, that it always has a sort of a universal quality that even when you think you're experiencing something that's very unique or even isolating to you, it's actually something that, people deal with every day of the week, and they've been dealing with for hundreds of years, thousands of years, even more. This is from Han, and it says, my question, please share your thoughts about narcissism and spirituality, responsibility and freedom. Could it be that some self-centered people can use spirituality as a way to reinforce their self-centeredness and justify hurting people? You bet it can. For example, some people could say, I want to have a free life with free relationships, so they go on having sex and having fun with many women or men without bothering about responsibilities or commitment. Please share your thoughts about this. Well, thank you, Han, for writing this question. I think it's really summarized right at the beginning, the first sentence. Please share your thoughts about narcissism and spirituality, responsibility and freedom. Because freedom does come with a responsibility. Freedom, if we see freedom only in personal terms, only in terms of what my freedom, if we get too stuck on the sense of my freedom, and then the mind can start to use an idea of freedom, not real freedom, but the idea of freedom, to justify doing anything it wants. In other words, to be irresponsible. And so it's one of the dangers of life, but it's certainly one of the dangers of the spiritual life, is the spiritual life, if you're not careful, can start to become kind of narcissistic. In other words, it can become very, very self-centered, and not only self-centered, but self-justifying. That you can actually use a spiritual teaching, in order to justify about anything you want. I've seen it done many, many, many times. That the egoic mind can look through a teaching, and it can it's very cunning in the way it can use and twist things to its own advantage. And especially the teachings about freedom. A sort of very immature idea of freedom is it's just the freedom to do whatever I want to do whenever I want to do it, irrespective of the consequences or the effect it has on others. That's actually a delusion. That's really not freedom. That's a mind's idea of freedom. That's the ego using freedom in order to indulge in its own self-obsession. So when we talk about real spirituality, however, and real awakening itself and freedom itself comes with the kind of responsibility. It's the more clear we are, the more clear our consciousness is, the more we're in touch with a deep sort of inherent sense of integrity. That it's not the integrity or the conscience that, we get from society. It's not necessarily the norm, all the societal norms, but it's something that's sort of innate within us. Something that reminds us, something that knows when we're sort of on the mark or off the mark, when we're really being open or when we're really being narcissistic or self-centered. And part of becoming conscious is also becoming more and more aware of that orienting principle inside. That's what I call one's integrity, or traditionally it's been called one's conscience, but so often our consciences can be so mixed up with a lot of conditioned ideas. But the true conscience actually comes as flowers, as a product of a deeper and deeper state of consciousness, or awareness. And so it's something that one has to sort of be on the lookout. That I've always felt that true spirituality has these two drives very often, and there's this one drive that people want. Everyone has their own, or we start out with our own individual motivations. We may want to experience freedom, or not to suffer so much, or not to be in pain. We may have our own personal reasons why we're engaging in a spiritual life. But if our reasons are solely personal, then it's easy for the spirituality either to stall out at some point. It literally just stalls out at a premature place, or it becomes narcissistic. But I think the true spiritual impulse, it can contain these sort of personal elements of not wanting to suffer or wanting to be free. But if it's authentic, if it's real, it also contains a real love and a real concern of all beings, of all humanity. That we realize we are participating in this great immensity called life. And this great human family. And the real spiritual impulse has inherent with it a kind of empathy for the world and for the impact that we have on the world, for our contribution to the world. And it's this aspect of spirituality where we feel like, we might want to be free, we might want to know God, we might want to not suffer so much. But also, I think a healthy spirituality, all that is balanced out by having an equal desire or an equal concern for the whole. Like I said, for the way that we are going to contribute to the world that we find ourselves occupying. And so, that has to be. It's very, very important to keep that in mind and to have a real sense. And of course, it takes a kind of honesty and it takes a kind of humility to keep in touch with both of these aspects of the spiritual drive, so that the spiritual life does not become hijacked by the personal self and just becomes an expression of sort of self-obsession or narcissism. But the spiritual life has its roots in amongst all beings and all things. Because after all, when we really experience genuine unity, then we really do, in a real way, experience that all beings and all things are not apart from us. That in their most fundamental sense, they are us. They are us. And this, I think, gives a rise to an even deeper love or a deeper interest in what our impact on the world is. And so that kind of interest, that aspect of spirituality, that it is concerned about our impact on the world around us, is very, very, very important, because it keeps you honest and it keeps spirituality real, and it's the protectant to spirituality becoming an object of the self-centered ego. So I think that's really, really quite important.